Welcome everyone once more. Joining me today, Madam Askew, is my wonderful co-host, the Airship Ambassador, Kevin Style. We also have with us many luminaries today, Lisa Hager from Studio Folio, Kaja and Phil Foglio, Tracy
Hello.
Chan from Hawaii, Erica Mulkey, best known as Unwoman out in the world, and Mike Pershon, a delightful scholar from the North. Welcome all. If you feel moved, if you would be willing to give a little introduction to yourselves, we would be so delighted to learn more about each of you. Shall we start with the Airship Ambassador? Would you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself?
Sure. Well, I guess I enjoyed steampunk before it even had a name, but then really jumped into it by attending SteamCon in 2009, which is where I met Mike first at one of his panels. And then the following year started Airship Ambassador for the blog and heavily leaned into interviews, which is, I guess, my niche that I enjoy the most of just talking to people, meeting people around the world and sharing what they do. So that's me.
Lisa, would you continue on for us, please?
Sure, of course. I'm Lisa Hager. I am an assistant professor of English and Gender Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I published a lot on steampunk, mostly on the Leviathan series, which I still really love. Though I realized when I was going through my books that I lent out the first book to somebody and I had no idea who it went to, which I'm sure many of you know. And now I'm like, but where is it? And I'm currently working on a book length project on trans identities in the 19th century. Um, Shockingly making the argument, guess what? There were trans people in the 19th century is like still an argument we need to make, which to me is a little weird, but here we are.
Yeah.
And I'm currently, I've written on female husbands in the 19th century, so I'm happy to talk about those folks. And I'm currently writing on a George Moore story called Albert Nobbs, which was made into a questionable movie, very problematic, by Glenn Close. But in the story, Albert Nobbs actually identifies as a perhapser, so a non-binary person.
Oh, no, wait, say it again. A what?
A perhapser.
Oh, I love it.
I know,
wow.
right? And George Moore is an ass, and that's really important to know. So, like, how did this great story get written? Who knows? But there we are. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I'm so happy to talk with you all.
Thank you, Lisa. Studio Folio.
Hello.
That's us. You go first, then I'll go.
There you go. Fine.
You go first, then I'll do damage.
I'm Phil Julio. How do you do? My wife and myself, we are best known in the steampunk milieu for Girl Genius, which is started as a comic, became a web comic, and is also a set of novelizations. And that's been running for
way too long. All right, that's enough damage. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm Kaja. What?
No, you're not.
No, I'm not. I'm Kaja Foglio, and I'm half of Studio Folio. And yeah, like Phil said, we do the Girl Genius series, and we've been doing it for a long, long time. We actually started working on it in '93, but we didn't get it start publishing it until late '99. And we took it online in, what was it, 2005? We've got mostly a lot of comics, a whole lot of comics, some novels, and there's recently been a video game put out. So we're very pleased about that. That's mostly who we are at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you. Great video game too, by the way.
Oh, that, yeah.
I mean, we didn't make it, but thank you anyway.
Yeah.
I like it too.
Tracy.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Tracy Chan, and I was a punk before I was a steampunk. I like to preface it with that just because I was so drawn to the creativity and crafting and kind of outside the boxness of steampunk in general. I'm a journalist and I work communications at the largest nonprofit community arts center in downtown Honolulu. So I have a vested interest in nonprofits, history, writing, grammar, you know, that sort of thing. I've been running Steampunk Hawaii since 2013 when I started the Facebook group and discovered that there was a hunger for it in the islands. And our first meetup in 2013, I asked around a few people, hey, are there actually steampunks in Hawaii? And the answer was a resounding yes. So I created a Facebook event, called up Hawaiian Railway Society a couple towns over and said, do you guys know what steampunk is? And they were like, well, you know, we've heard of it from across the country. Other train yards, railway nonprofits are, you know, these strange groups of people in top hats and corsets are popping up. So sure, we'd like to try a group too. And I said, okay, well, maybe I'll bring a few people down. 75 people showed up.
Wow.
Nice.
And surprisingly, it was about half photographers. Photographers have always been a huge part of our group and given us a great deal of good publicity. I myself am a photographer and a writer as well. So our group is mostly event oriented, but we've been working with a lot of historical nonprofits, educational groups, and we try to maintain active engagement with other communities around Oahu, especially.
Thank you, Tracy. I remember that first event and your pictures. They were great.
It's incredible.
You should be. Erica, hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much. I am a musician known as Unwoman. I released my first album in 2002, also before I knew what steampunk was. And it was kind of more goth industrial, but I played cello. So it was, and I have a classical background, and it was just so logical and so perfect when I found steampunk in 2008. And my first big event, Kevin, was also SteamCon in 2009. And that kind of got me started on the whole thing. And I met so many people at that event that ended up being, you know, friends for years and stuff. And I currently have a Patreon, and I produce my own music, so I make things all the time, and I still am doing it. I took a break on traveling for events when I had a baby in 2016. And then I was about to get back on the scene, and then COVID happened, and I'm kind of still hunkering down. Haven't really flown anywhere, but I do the local steampunk event, Clockwork Alchemy, in the Bay Area every year, which is awesome. And just really happy to see you all.
Thank you so much.
Quick note, yeah, SteamCon was a great start to meet a lot of people and meet you there. And then again, Victoria there in Canada. And I also met Phil and Kaja there at SteamCon and totally got hooked on Girl Genius instantly and have been reading it 3 times a week ever since.
I love that. I love that. SteamCon, hallowed be its name, first of its kind. I miss you. Erica, welcome. Thank you. Good to have you here. Mike, hello.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Mike Pershon. I got into steampunk for very mercenary and selfish reasons. I didn't want to be the 20,000th person to write about Austen or Dickens, so I decided I wanted to be one of the first people to write about something new, and that's pretty much how I chose to go after steampunk. What was very lucky about that, though, is that there was an event that was in 2008. There was an event in the Bay Area called Steam Powered. It was a one-off. They didn't do it again. But I contacted one of the planning people, and they said they'd love to have me come down and talk. And I didn't know anything. And so I crash coursed myself in about 3 weeks on anything I could learn. Ended up on a panel of steampunk writers. That was the funniest part of the weekend, I think, was sitting on a panel that was called Steampunk Writing. And I was on with Jeff Vandermeer and a yet to be famous Gail Carriger. And then me. And they're like, so what have you written? And I'm like, nothing. But I read a lot.
Like that. Oh, yeah.
So yeah, and it did do what I wanted it to. It sort of kicked off my career. steampunk really made my career. There's no way around that. And it's been really good for me. It's been awesome. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, for those who have not, I remember your blog, The Steampunk Scholar, and that was very seminal for me in terms of my steampunk journey.
Well, thank you.
So I'm very happy you had that mercenary drive to succeed as a doctoral candidate, not writing about Jane Austen, despite my love of Austen. I'm happy to read about other people. So thank you. Right, Kevin, my darling ambassador. Of course, I'm a chatty Cathy, but this is a mutual project between the two of us. Would you like to talk a little bit about our genesis, why we decided to do this, as we get into our questions and conversation with our wonderful panel of guests?
Sure. Oh gosh, you and I started talking just about steampunk in general and things that we were doing, and that I had wanted to essentially reboot Airship Ambassador. That I've taken a break, mostly for real life reasons. That other things, priorities change, right, in all our lives, and there was work, there was a relationship, there were just other things going on. But I was ready to get back into steampunk and do what I enjoy. And so that was part of our conversation, and that I wanted to and still want to do a series called Steampunk Reforged, kind of almost exactly what we're talking about. Looking back, where has steampunk been, or the genesis in the last 15 years or so? How has it changed, especially with COVID? And now looking forward to what it could be, which is really the theme of our discussion today. And so that's how it really got started. And then I think we kind of scrambled and put something together here with everybody, with yesterday being International Steampunk Day. And
really? He tells me anything.
Yeah.
I had to put the flag out, man.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
right.
We need a steampunk flag. There probably is one.
Yeah, there's so many things going on. But it was great to bring everybody together today, especially that all of you were involved, I think, at least for me, right from the start. So that we all have a really good perspective of what it was like 10, 15 years ago, and then how things have developed and changed in the community and for us. And that I also think we all have a unique perspective. We're coming from different areas of either academics or entertainment or events, content, and that lends what extra information for everybody else that are participating and listening to us today. So that's how it all came about, and I think where we're headed today.
Excellent. Thank you, my dear friends. I'd like to add to that I think for both of us, there was this sense, a strong sense that we know new people are always coming into steampunk. And it's so nice to be able to share a little bit of like, this is where we've come from. These are some of the things that were foundational, not just a certain novel about a different engine. There's more to it than that. And these are some of the people who really helped shape the community we have today, and being able to share that conversation with all of you, I think is really important, and a gift back to our community, and a bit of a thank you to all of you for what you've done over the years to make this the vibrant space it is. So as we are taking off, Kevin, do you want to pose the first question?
Sure. So for each of you, you've talked a little bit about kind of what brought you into steampunk and what you started with. But could you go into a little more detail about, I guess, what you did or still do within the community, and maybe a little bit of why? And so actually, I'd like to start with Mike. Yeah, because one of the first people I met. But
yeah, I remember that very clearly. I looked down in the front row, and there's this really good-looking guy. No, you were like super striking. Like Kevin stood out. Kevin's always stood out. If you've ever met Kevin at a con, you'll know, like, stands out. And he was right in the front row, and he was listening, which was weird.
And the panel was about Captain Nemo,
right.
And 20,000 Leagues and the has been my favorite since I was a kid. And I watched the movie with my parents when I was very, very little. And the Nautilus has always been my favorite vehicle love. But then just hearing more about Captain Nemo was so entertaining and informative. And so Mike and I have been talking ever since. And I've learned so much from you, Mike, over the years. And uh, even when we had a difference of opinion, I probably came around to your perspective later. It's like, well, that really does make sense. Okay, I get it.
That's why you're the ambassador.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. So, and one thing I enjoyed, so I'd like you to talk about your blog because it was also informative for me getting started, that when I wanted to start Airship Ambassador, I didn't want to do what other people were doing. I was like, what would be my niche? And so I was always reading your blog. And then over time, of course, you started working on your dissertation, and which I thoroughly enjoyed reading and was so great. And everybody should.
Who enjoys reading a dissertation, right?
It was great.
I appreciate that. I actually, when you do a dissertation, they have to have what's called an outside reader take a look at your work. And all my inside readers, everybody who was at my university, was like, this is too colloquial, it's too conversational, you're making jokes in it. And my outside reader was like, this was the most fun I've ever had reading a dissertation. And see, like, that was what I was going for right there, was that reader. I couldn't have cared less about all that. I don't like stuffy stuff. I can't be bothered with it, which is why I did the blog in the first place, because I needed a space to talk about my research, but the traditional route wasn't working for me because no one knew what steampunk was in the academic circles I ran in. And then I went to an academic conference in California in 2009, and I presented my stuff on Captain Nemo, and I thought we would have a conversation about Nemo and whatnot. And the first question was, what is steampunk? And so I realized, I'm like, well, I can't talk to academics about this. They're just going to keep asking me that question. And so that was where steampunk conventions were more useful to me in constructing. And so that conversation that emerged from the Steampunk Scholar website was really useful to me. Like the comments section, people bouncing stuff back, Twitter before it was crappy, was a really great place for me to have conversations with actual steampunks about. So these are people who are reading the same stuff I am, who are thinking about the same questions I am, and we were having those conversations. So that was the goal with the blog. An unintended side effect was that I started being referred to at cons, like people would introduce me as the steampunk scholar, like I was the only one. I always felt like, no, there's quite a few others, and some of them are doing a hell of a lot more than I am. That was one of those things that just sort of like, I had intended to just put stuff out there and have a conversation, and before I knew it, it was becoming the thing that people were seeing as this is a resource. And for even now, I'll get emails from master's students and PhD students because their prof, they'll be like, I want to write about steampunk, and their prof's like, I don't know what that is. And so they can't construct a decent reading list for them, so then they ask me. I tell them what they should read, and their prof says, you can't read that, it's trash. And I'm like, well, whatever they're going to get you to read won't be steampunk, trust me. So, because they don't see things like the stuff that is steampunk, and it's not trash. It's great. It's just that, people who are used to reading Thomas Pynchon don't necessarily see it that way. So, yeah. Does that answer? Oh, and why do I do what I do? I'm like Al Pacino in The Godfather 2. Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. That's sort of been my experience. And it wasn't that I wanted to get away from steampunk. It's just that, you're like, I did a thing, maybe now I'll do another thing. No, I frequently am getting asked. I shouldn't say frequently. I still get asked to do steampunk stuff, and I love it. And it's continued to be a really good thing, not only for me, but a couple of years ago, I was able to actually get 2 of my students their first publication by writing with them. And so I still enjoy sharing it. and being part of it. But I don't want to take up any more time because there's other people to. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin, this is your question. Who would you like to ask next?
Oh, well, if we stay on the academic track, Lisa. So you also have an academic perspective and have written some essays that have been in different publications over the years, and also things that I've enjoyed reading, because it gives a perspective, you know, beyond just having the fun part of steampunk. But one of the things that I say frequently is steampunk sends a message, or is a message, and what is that message? And everybody's message is different. But so you've written about that too. So if you could comment on that, but also the other things that you've done with steampunk, I think, from that perspective.
Sure. So here's a like way back. The first time I encountered steampunk was at Dragon Con in Atlanta. It was the first time they ever had the alt history track, which is now like very big and developed. And it was in this tiny little room in one of the hotels. There was a panel, and I had been asked to present. I can't even remember what I presented on. And they gave us this tiny room because it was the first time, and everybody was like, what is this steampunk stuff anyways? And it was standing room only. And this was the first time that I, as an academic, had ever seen like somebody, not just one person, but a whole entire room of people like super excited about learning about Victorian culture and Victorian literature and, you know, all of the 19th century stuff that I geek out about. And so for me, it was a way to enjoy my academic subject in a way that I don't know that a lot of academics do, right? Like, let's enjoy it and have fun and be silly. And that for me is why I love the Victorians, because they're whacktastic. And I like when I say that at an academic conference, you know, if I'm with, you know, people I'm friends with, they're like, sure. But a lot of people like will look at you like you're not being serious or something. And so that was what got me hooked on steampunk. And then when I moved to Wisconsin, I started attending and presenting at TeslaCon, which is where I met Kevin. And it was really, for me, I think it's been a great way to get outside the academic bubble, to interact with people who are doing community building, who are creating amazing garments that I'm daily in awe of, Jocelyn. And, you know, connecting people and crossing national boundaries, or publishing and writing. And so that's what got me hooked on it. And I will say, like, for me, I had twins right before the pandemic. And so, like, I've only just now actually gone to an academic conference for the first time since the pandemic. And that was like, oh, hi, how are you? And I'm like, I have 4-year-olds. And so, you know, how did that happen? So for me, I haven't been like attending things in person, but I will totally say that following the Airship Ambassador and Madame Askew has, even though I'm totally a lurker, has given me like joy at various moments, because it's like, here are people that are doing the good work and are doing fun stuff and bringing people together. And I will say that my interactions with people in the steampunk community has also led me to do the longer work I'm doing on trans studies, which is to sort of not follow down the trodden paths of academia, and to really push against the stories that we've been told, right? So in some ways, and now that I am talking about this, and this is why I love steampunk, I'm realizing that what I'm actually doing is an alternative history that's more true than the one we've been told, right? That there have been gender nonconforming people since there were ever people. And like the female husbands people, they were like, I had an undergrad read them, so I can tell you there were 193 articles published about female husbands from 1829 to like 1870. And this is a history we're not told, right? You know, trans people are new. They just got invented. Which, I mean, not true. Like, they didn't spring fully formed from the head of like Zeus or a drag queen or something. And like, that's what and people will tell me, like, I've gotten feedback from academics that my work is political, and I'm like, is it though? Like, I'm just saying they were there. Right.
Yeah, you're doing research and going like, we have evidence of this thing. Political.
I'm like, but literally here in the articles where they like mix up their pronouns because the writer is like, I don't know what to do. So I think.
I just want to comment that I have learned so much more about history, like you're sharing, because of steampunk. That none of this is ever taught in schools. It's not talked about in general. It's not any mainstream articles or anything. But through steampunk, I have learned so much more, so many more interesting things.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, because what people in remixing and revising and rethinking, you're like, oh, there is a history of this thing, and seeing what people do with it. And I have always insisted, and I'm sure other people would hear, is that steampunk work is itself a form of interpretation and critique. And so for me as an academic, I see that as, here's one kind of thing that I do in academia, and here's what all these steampunk folks are doing. And so it's always been a joy. And also, I'll just say, like, steampunk folks in general are super nice and welcoming. And like, Kevin and I hang out with, and I like, I'm such, seriously, I'm gonna bring the twins next year.
Yeah.
And but like, Eric might hate me because they'll totally destroy the whole con in like 5 minutes. They are co-conspirators, and it's exponential, not additive. So that's important to realize.
Dress them up really cute. It'll be fun.
Oh my gosh, I mean, you can put them in potato sacks and they're cute, but yes. So I haven't like been out and about, and I think I love that events like this make me think I need to do that more. So I'm gonna put that in my unconscious brain and think about it.
Nice.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Well, Phil and Kaja, I'd like to move to you next, because again, I mean, I met you at SteamCon, and I was at your table, and I was like, oh, what's this Girl Genius? Like, well, that looks good. And then after the convention, totally went binge reading everything that you had published up until that point, so I could catch up. And I've been hooked ever since. Got all the books, the video game from the Kickstarter, and all the other stuff. It's, yeah, totally love it. So, but you have a long history before Girl Genius. There were a lot of things that you were working on before then. But so talk about those. And how did that lead you to Girl Genius, I suppose?
Oh my.
Well, let's see. Mostly
all I'd ever done before Girl Genius was a bunch of Magic the Gathering art, but and college, but
some book illustrations.
You can't say I did some Magic the Gathering art like it was a secondary thing, because I'm fanning over here. Like, seriously.
It was what I did right out of college. I got out of college, I painted some pictures for this up-and-coming card game, and that was a lot of fun. This one, though, did a lot of stuff before we worked on Girl Genius.
I was very active in the science fiction community, did a lot of did some book covers, did a lot of illustrations, did a lot of work in comics, and did a lot of what we would call independent comics, because at that time, the main two comic book companies, Marvel and DC, were very rigid as far as their house style. And rigid is one thing my house style is not. So
yeah. You were too silly for them.
I was.
Silly.
I know. If I wanted to get published, I had to do it myself. And that allowed us to think about publishing Girl Genius, because pretty much our ethos was always like, if you're going to publish something that the other companies cannot or will not.
I just go with make what you want. Somebody else out there probably also wants it. So Phil, as far as comics went, he did a comic book adaptation of Robert Asprin's Myth Adventures novel, or the first Myth Adventures novel. He did an X-rated comic called Xenophile. He did Buck Godot's Zap Gun for Hire, which is very science fiction-y flavored. And all of those were, and then he did What's New with Phil and Dixie in Dragon Magazine, which was a comic strip about Dungeons and Dragons back in the early 80s. Now, all of those had kind of come to an end, and Phil was talking about, well, what should I do next? I don't know. Should I do more of this? Should I do more of that? And one of our friends said, well, why don't you do something new? And we kind of went,
what a weird idea.
It's weird. I don't know. So at that time, I was going through Phil's old sketches, and I had something in my brain about mad scientists because I like mad science, and Phil had all these old sketches where, so originally Girl Genius was supposed to be kind of near future modernish, and all these old sketches were like cats with walking sticks and funky airships with dragons. And I said, well, why don't we do something that looks like this kind of like Victorian Lovecrafty kind of stuff. We didn't know the word steampunk. And even if we had, it looked a little different than what we were talking about to us at that time. So, so we were like, yeah, you don't see a lot of that around. That's cool. So we did that, and it's worked out really well for us. It's been a lot of fun.
It was interesting when we were working on Girl Genius as a contemporary set story.
It was like for a week, but
it just wasn't gelling.
Yeah, because it was garbage. Because there wasn't much to it.
There wasn't much to it.
Yeah.
And then when Kaja said we should draw it like this. We
should make it match the couch. make the art match the couch.
So all of a sudden we were able to tap into a lot of archetypes and stuff like that, and it was just all of a sudden
tropes
whatever
tropes in your friends.
And it was like, wow, this not only is this easy, but it's fun, and I get a chance to draw stuff that nobody's ever asked me to draw.
It must be easy. We keep finding things to do with it. We've got to get this thing to the end eventually before we die.
And as a quick aside, the outfits you draw in the strip are amazing, and somebody who doesn't need to be named might need some new coats based on those, because
well, I think it all looks like it was inspired by your incredible blue coat that I still remember from the conventions where I first started meeting you around. It's
thank you.
Yeah,
I think we took pictures of it. I think I remember being like, hold still.
And Phil, you have some background with outfits and design.
Well, when I was at art college, Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, which went out of business the year I graduated, not my fault.
No connection, of course.
Yeah.
What did you do, Phil?
Don't know. I took 4 years of fashion illustration, which is one of the three courses I tell every young artist to try and take when they go to art school, because it teaches you just the practicalities of outfits. I mean, you look at superhero stuff and it's like, yeah, I suppose if you've kind of got the frame that allows you to like spray paint something on. Most of us do not.
Performer costumes.
What?
Superhero outfits. It came from circus performers, or so I have read.
Yes, that's
true.
So it
gives them lots of ease of movement, I guess. And
yeah.
also is easier to draw because then you have to draw those folds. The folds are hard.
Folds are hard. There are very good books that tell you how to draw
I'll
folds.
have to find some.
I've got them.
I know. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, he just likes to wear things. He likes to wear the fancy clothes. He likes the waistcoats and stuff.
I do.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't change out of what I was wearing to bed, so I'm sorry for that. But
Oh, well, I barely did, but yeah, I have these fine shirts. I like whoever made these shirts. I should find them and thank them.
that's an Abney Park shirt.
It is not an Abney Park shirt.
Oh,
No, it's not. Although
not an Abney Park.
Hurrah for Abney Park and stuff. I have no idea what they're doing at the moment, but no, it's just a shirt with there it's got like a thing on it. I can see why you made the mistake.
Yes,
but yeah.
Great. All right, thank you. Erica.
Oh, that's me.
Yep.
Hi.
And oh gosh, I'm not even sure where to start.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, so we have also known each other, right from SteamCon.
Yeah.
And at several other conventions over the years. So I guess, so you have a music background, clearly. And I guess, how did that lead you into steampunk? I don't know, especially, particularly, or?
Yeah. Well, everything just kind of happened at the right time for me. In 2006, I got to play with Rasputina. And in 2009, I toured with him very briefly, and it was amazing. I loved it. But for various personal reasons, I couldn't continue. But then I played with Voltaire. Then I joined this Bay Area band, Vernian Process. And Vernian Process brought me to SteamCon. And the lineup was me playing solo, Vernian Process, and Abney Park, which will never happen again. And it was magical. And when this, I think it was Jeff Vandermeer's book about steampunk came out, there wrote this list of musicians, and I wasn't in it, but like 80% of them were acts that I have played with. So I guess I'm steampunk. And then when I would sit on steampunk panels and we talk about what steampunk music is, I love that everybody had a different definition. My goal was always, I'm not going to sing songs about steampunk. I'm going to sing songs that fit in someone's steampunk world. So like a love song, whatever. And the aesthetics are, there's technology, and there's also beauty and human, human playing, human emotion, human stories, all that stuff. So that's kind of that's the short of my story.
You have a new album out, don't you?
I always have a new album out.
Where can one get it?
Oh, thank you. Unwoman.com has links to pretty much everything. The new thing that's coming out is Uncovered Volume 8. So I've released, I guess, 9 original albums, and now this will be my 8th. God, 8. I can't, honestly, I've lost track because I make a lot of music, and yeah, I have a Patreon, and people pay me $1 or so a song, and they can actually vote on which songs I cover. And then when I have 15 songs, I release an album. So I pretty much always have something new all the time. And that's one of the best things in life for me.
So Erica, if I may jump in, I think the last time I saw you was at Clockwork Alchemy, but I always really look forward to seeing you because I'm a music school dropout. I failed at the opera life to become a comedian instead. And I love your take on steampunk music. It very much overlaps what I wanted from steampunk as a musical experience, which is like, well, if we do all of this nonsense with clothes and art and our stories, could we do that with music too? I like a good rollicking tune about an airship. Who doesn't? But I want it to sound like it was put through the blender of this weird 19th century steam infused nonsense that we do. You really nail it. Also, you look badass when you're doing it too. So
Thank you so much. For anybody who hasn't seen me live, most of my shows I play electric cello. I play it standing up. I do live looping. I used to play with backing tracks, so at the first SteamCon I had backing tracks. And in 2012, I think TeslaCon, I had just gotten my looper and I decided to do that, and I did, and it was great. So yeah, thank you so much.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Kevin, I return to you. That was just had to interrupt.
All right. Not at all. Not at all. It's good. All right, Tracy. So, gosh, I was thinking I had met you before, but I know for sure that we met just recently in February, March at the Wild Wild West Con. And it was so great to chat with you and talk about groups that are still active, I think. So community groups that are being social and doing things and talking and just being involved. And so I guess, how did your interest in steampunk, I guess, lead you into Steampunk Hawaii and the group?
So for me, it's always been about community building. I think, Lisa, you mentioned community building, right? And that's where I came from as a punk, as a member of the goth industrial community. Huge fan, Erica. I saw you in Hawaii at, I think it was Mercury Bar at the time, this little tiny off the beaten path bar in an alley. And this incredible woman got up there and started playing the electric cello. I was just blown away. So,
oh my God, thank you so much. I was gonna ask if you know DJ Nocturna.
Yeah, I spin for her all the time, actually. So I'm a goth industrial DJ. For 7 years, we had a nightlife promotion company that threw goth industrial events. And actually, I came to steampunk through that because steampunk and goth have quite a few crossovers, as you folks are probably aware. I don't like the whole stupid meme about goths discovering brown. That's not really how it happened. I was in the goth community and I saw something new and exotic and awesomely Victorian pop up. And I went, wow, that's really cool. So how I got into Steampunk Hawaii from that actually is DJ Nocturna was throwing a fashion show and it was a steampunk themed fashion show. And I was like, what even is this? I don't understand. And everybody was coming up to me telling me, oh, you're going to love this. I was like, I don't even know what it is. How can I love it? So the models got up and they had like, you know, the full steampunk armor and the hats and the goggles and the gadgets and the shiny stuff. And, you know, us goth kids, we're attracted to shiny stuff in black. So I actually met the gentleman that I inherited the Steampunk Hawaii group from at that fashion show. His name was Zimran Lucero, and he moved away to LA to become a film set designer. I think he's in Seattle or something now. But for a while there, if you Googled the word steampunk, one of the first photos to come up was my photo of him wearing a steampunk arm that he had designed. And that was for several years before steampunk just really, really exploded and took over Google. But yeah, and then I inherited the group from him. There were a few makers in Honolulu around 2012 that had done like just Christmas parties, little informal stuff, but it wasn't until 2013 that we actually started meeting up. And that community building has always been in the back of my mind. I mentioned historical nonprofits before. We've worked with a number of historical nonprofits around Hawaii, and this is a true, it's been known as a melting pot for a long time, and Hawaii's history in the West really starts around the 1800s. So we have so much history at our fingertips. We're the only state with kings and queens and palaces. And around the 1820s, when the first missionaries landed, was when the Hawaiian royals, the elite, really started getting into Victorian fashion. And they had the first electricity. They had the first electrically lit palace in the US. Iolani Palace is just down the street from where I live, actually. So if anybody wants photos. But yeah, so we work with these historical nonprofits and we try to tie steampunk into the history of place. And so we go to Mission Houses Museum, which is dedicated to the first missionaries to land in Hawaii. And we do our, Victorian dress. We dress steampunk. People say, oh my goodness, they're so cool. And they take pictures of us. We've actually done field trips to Iolani Palace, Hawaiian Railway Society, Foster Botanical Garden, which is the historic first botanical garden in Hawaii. And they have community events all the time. And I think really that's what's kept our group sustainable is an active involvement in community and kind of crossover with many other communities too, because cosplay is absolutely huge in Hawaii. I'm not going to get started with the debate on whether steampunk is cosplay or culture. That's for someone else to decide.
That's another roundtable discussion.
I'll let the academics handle that one. But for us being so close to Japan, cosplay is huge, and our cosplay conventions regularly attract, 20,000 people. And so steampunk, that's an opportunity for steampunk to have an incubation ground, basically. So at every con, I have a steampunk meetup, my group shows up, a bunch of random kids show up who just discovered steampunk, and just the joy in their eyes to find out that they have a community is incomparable. So yeah, we do Hawaii Geek Meet, which is a huge meetup of every nerddom on the island, basically, from programmers, coders, cosplayers, steampunks, leather workers, metal workers. I know a lot of artists because I work in an art gallery, so they're there too. We do cosplay at the Capitol, which is hosted by the Hawaii State Capitol. One of the secretaries at the Hawaii State Capitol is actually in my group. And one of the curators at the Honolulu Museum of Art is also in my group. So we have these kind of strategically placed spies infiltrating the community. But it helps, and especially being on an island, it's sort of a small town mentality in a medium-sized city, if that makes sense. And the more you get involved with your community, the better off you are. I think that can be said globally as well.
Definitely. Completely agree.
Oh.
Great. Thank you. Well, before we jump right into a total free-form discussion with all of you, Madam, how did you come into being the mistress of tea-punk dueling?
Oh my goodness. You are so cheeky, but thank you for asking me. I like to sort of pretend like I have nothing to say when I have scats to say, of course. But so honestly, it was the fault of books. I'm an avid reader, and I got whisked away by the siren song of Sherry Priest and then Gail Carriger. And they're very lovely people. And they also write really juicy prose, and I was smitten. And of course, I had to go hunt for more. When I discovered that there were people who also made clothes inspired by this, I was like, time travel is on. And that is when I was like, I'd been doing things in like the 1950s, and I'd visited the Italian Renaissance, which is a nice time, good food, great art. But some of the denizens there are very uptight about the weirdest things. And I really liked how the sort of steampunk medium allows you to play with fashion history and to suit yourself. And as a queer person, I'm here for that kind of audacity. And then I discovered what a wonderful, or maybe discovered is the wrong word, but I sort of found that my love of history and learning and exploring the past was really improved by doing this kind of playful costuming. I learned so much about the worlds and how people use things and interacted and a cultural perspective from mucking about with costumes and putting weird sleeves on the wrong century bodice. And, no one could stop me. I was like, hems, I've got hems for days. I'll do any hem I want. And so the world was sort of my oyster, but it wasn't, as you can tell, I'm very vivacious. And so it wasn't enough for me to simply wear pretty clothes and be quiet at events. First of all, how boring. I wanted people to wear pretty clothes with, and I wanted things to do with them. Like Tracy, I feel like community and connection and building up places that people feel welcome is essential, not only to my own well-being, but to improving the world around me. And my grandparents will come back from the dead if I don't do that, and they will haunt me forever. So I felt a moral imperative to do good in the world. And if you want to do events, it's nice to have things for people to do at events. And I read a delightful article produced about something that happened at Dragon Con, to come back to Lisa's remembrance of the alt history track, about this weird thing called tea dueling. And the description was very vague in the article, it was very loose. So I went on the etherwebs and I found a little thing from Dr. Jeff and Tinker, and they were like, here are the rules. And I read them. I was like, should be easy. Let's do it. Well, it was messy, and someone lost a tooth. True story.
Oh my gosh.
He was 10 and the tooth was loose.
Wow.
But still, he lost his tooth tea dueling. It's been a part of the legend ever since. We had no idea what we were doing. I read the rules wrong that first time. I've gotten better since then. But we had a wonderful time doing it. And it made the event so much more lively and engaging. And it was also a great icebreaker, because sometimes you can love a thing and want to be part of a thing, but you don't know how to talk about the thing. And if somebody gives you something fun to do, then the conversation makes itself. And so into my dear best chum in the universe, the Grand Arbiter, who's off being gay, doing gay things today. And he was like, let's do this whole tea dueling thing as though we were weird Japanese game show hosts in the 19th century and see how that goes on. And that is how Madame Askew and the Grand Arbiter started. So
Very good.
yeah, no, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
So I have
Very
all the
good.
M's, all of them.
But
Yeah.
always entertaining and always fun to participate, I think. I think several of us, maybe all of us, have participated at one time or another.
Yeah, I think the interactive things are so nice. And there have been many more that have been generated since the advent of tea dueling. But it's nice that as steampunks, we have our own weird sports. So, and you can earn prizes. I dream of an Olympics of tea someday. You know, who knows? So, Kevin, shall we unleash the floodgates? Shall we just get into a little bit more freeform? Would you like to throw out a general question to our wonderful cavalcade of humans here?
Sure. So yeah, freeform, not calling on anybody, just jump in. So still a little bit of retrospective before we get to kind of steampunk of today. But what is at least one of your memorable events from, I guess, the heyday of steampunk, and things that you were doing that you really enjoyed, or maybe even help shape, form, direct what you do now? So I'll just jump in. So I've always enjoyed the interviews, and I have met just the most amazing people around the world from it, and gotten to know more people and talk to all the groups. And as I tried to stay up with news and information and share that with everybody on social media and through Airship Ambassador, that just meeting people has been so amazing. I think that, and learning much more about really, really interesting history beyond school, which, yeah, was pretty narrow.
Oof.
So I will dive in a little bit, Kevin, to sort of prime the pump on like a favorite memory or experience of steampunk outside of a child losing his tooth.
Which is a great memory in itself.
So he is 21 now, and I'm just cannot even. But one of my earliest events my very first steampunk event was at the very first Wild Wild West Con. Hello, Jason and Dina. And so as I was traipsing in to this very dusty, very evocative place, I just remember my first moment seeing Abney Park sort of traps around, and Voltaire was there, and I was like, ew, they're just running around, getting dusty. How delightful. Look at those dusty airship travelers. I was like, well, this might be fun. And then I had second thoughts about my footgear and needed a cup of tea. But that moment of walking in and just seeing people floating about will always stay forever indelibly printed on my brain. And just the ways in which we can walk into a space and transform it by our presence into this ambiance, this evocation of a past that we've all collaborated in creating in our minds. It's beautiful. So yeah.
I'll jump in if that's cool. I got invited to go to a space symposium, like real space industry, and I thought it was a joke. I thought it, like, because I just very briefly looked at their website, and like one of the cast of Star Trek, The Next Generation, had been there, so I was like, oh, it's a con. And because Air Canada sucks, I ended up getting there not late, but I was rushed into the room. And so, you know, they're asking an academic English professor from Canada to come to their event and talk about steampunk. I'm like, it's just a con. It can't be anything else. And they rush me into the room, and somebody's talking about space elevators, which I was going to talk about in my thing, because it was like space and steampunk. And I was thinking of this book by a Canadian author, a YA Canadian author, and talking about, you know, the space elevator, which was a cool concept, but was never done because we couldn't. And there was a guy seriously talking about it at the front of the room. And I looked around, no one was laughing. No one was winking. And I was like, oh no, where am I? And then somebody from SpaceX got up, and I'm like, oh no, what the heck? And my handler introduces me to this woman who's going to introduce me, and she's like, can you give like a 5-minute, like shrunken down version of your talk, you know, so we can sort of promo that you're going to be doing it, you know, right away. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I'm completely invested in doing this while my brain is going, you should know who that was. Like my brain was like, you know, that person, they're famous. And I'm like, I couldn't place. And then so I'm at the back talking with the sound person or the tech people, and I'm like, so that, you know, I'm cutting out all sorts of slides to make this new version. And just as I'm about to go up onto stage, they flash this woman's name, and my brain goes, that's the first Black woman to go into space.
Whoa.
And I'm like, an astronaut is introducing me.
Wow.
And I remember asking her after, like, what were you thinking bringing me here? Because I went into this room filled with people who understand physics and science, and I don't, and going like, so the space elevator thing, I thought that was a load of crap, but apparently you guys have some ideas about how to do that now. But how about Treasure Planet and solar sails? And they're like, no, that's real too. And I was like, shit. So it just kept, I was basically like, all right, here's this wacky theory. And they're like, we're working on that one. And I was like, whoa. And so I spoke to the promoters, the planners, and they were like, we just wanted you to get them thinking outside the box. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's good. Because I mean, that is, and some of you have already said that today too, the steampunk has that ability to allow us to think outside the box. I think most interestingly, socially, I'm with Lisa on that I think the most interesting retrofuturism of steampunk is the social stuff. But it was it was wild. So that was a standout for me, because usually when I show up, I'm just talking to literary folks about literary stuff, and it's fiction, fiction, fiction. And that one, yeah, that was I met 4 astronauts that day, and they were all women, which
Wow.
was I thought was really cool. It was
That's very cool.
that's social retrofuturism for me. Growing up in the 70s, it's all dudes.
That's
So
such a great story. That's such a great story.
That is the best story.
Yeah, it was yeah. It was humbling.
I love that. But I also love when the sciences are like, we need a liberal arts person. Can we get someone in here to talk about words? And like, we don't understand infinitives or gerunds, but he does. Let's get him. Yeah, lovely.
So I wanted to share that I think I have 2 favorite memories. The first is winning drunken tea dueling. I'm not kidding, at TeslaCon. There might have been, let's put it this way, the drunken might need to be in all caps in that statement. Because, like, yeah. And I think one of my other favorite memories was putting together a panel with Kevin and Diana Foe and Ashley Rogers, and just like doing, like, really thinking through like the political power structures of steampunk, both like what's going on in steampunk and also how people are responding to all of the terribleness that was the Victorian Empire, and like revising it in ways that push us to think through it. I think also like P. D. G. Clark's work right now is really doing that. I taught the Ku Klux Klan book. What's it called? Somebody give me the
Ring shots?
Yes, Ring Shout. Um, in my science fiction class a few semesters ago, and it's just so good. Especially because I'm from the part of Georgia where Stone Mountain is, and if you don't know about that, like, I remember going there as a kid, and it was basically like a Confederate theme park at that point. Like, you went to the gift shop and it was like Confederate shot glasses and all of that. And like, we watched the laser show where all of the Confederate generals rode across the mountain. And I didn't think that that was weird, which is just shows you how weird it actually is, right? But I think doing that kind of alternative history work is, especially in a time where we're getting all these narratives of, oh, it's really like upper class white dudes who have it hard. And you're like, is it though really? And like, these kind of alternative histories, I think, often do a better job of pointing out how that narrative is false than people writing like, other angry rants, because then we just get into like rant contests. And so for me, it's really like, that's where I see steampunk's influence in fiction today, is the way in which alternative history can do that response. And I really love, though he's not gonna, I guess he's not developing it, but the Black God's Drums is just so good, and I want more of it. Like, it's such a short novella, and it ends in this like, and now more things are gonna happen, and then there's not more, and it makes me really sad.
As an aside, Lisa,
yeah,
thank you for bringing up that book, because it is one of my favorites.
it's so good.
Such a gem, and I need everyone to buy it. Just buy it and read it at some point, but buy it, because sometimes the only way you can get someone to write more is if the publishers think that it is marketable, and the Black God's Drum simply did not get enough love, and it needs more love, because it is so good.
It's so good, and what I like about it is it gives you knowledge that you didn't know, right? Like, and I mean, that's really a silly thing to say, but for me, a lot of my students had no idea that Haiti and the Dominican Republic are the same island, and the reasoning for that having to do with basically like racist debt. And like, my students get debt because they all have student loans, and I'm like, and here's what they did to Haiti, and they're like, Oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize they were the same place. And I'm like, well, of course, because we don't talk about them like they're the same place, right? So it's doing really important work in that way.
I think we need to have a talk with him about writing more.
I love it. Yeah, Ring Shout's also really good. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, Stone Mountain, please, please, let's talk about Stone Mountain. And that's Ring Shout, in case you want to look at that book. Yeah. Oh, and Nisi Shawl, yes, Nisi Shawl, like all of that.
So, as a little bit of a plug for me, I host a monthly steampunk book club. It's a virtual book club. So all of you who are like, I want to read and talk about these things, we do. We do. We have read many of the books that have been mentioned. We continue to promote as many independent authors, people of color, marginalized voices as we can, who are willing to publish anything that is even remotely close to within any kind of perspective to steampunk. We will read it. And P. Jelly Clark, by the way, is a wonderful guest. And you can see 2 interviews I've done with him in the past on YouTube. But I recommend you encouraging him to write more because he's really good. So sorry, I had to take that moment. Kevin,
Oh,
don't leave me alone with books. I will just talk about them. I'm a menace. So.
We could have a whole session just on books as a roundtable discussion, and probably should. Yeah, there's great books out there. There's so much to read. And somebody, Mike, had just talked about Nisi and Everfair, which was a wonderful read. And everybody's experience is different, but for me, reading it was like eating comfort food. That just the way Nisi writes, it was so enjoyable and comforting, even when the topic being discussed or written about was not pleasant, or was, there were some hard conversations, but the way it was written is like, okay, I can get through this. This is going to be great, and I will be better for it at the end. It was wonderful and easily worthy of binge reading. Stay up till 3 a.m. and just read it straight through is amazing. Yeah. All right. Anybody else want to jump in? And
favorite memory and early moments for you that sort of.
I used to. I was probably in the early 2000s when I first discovered Etsy because one of my goth friends mentioned it. I used to go to Etsy in the morning and I would do a search for steampunk, and I would get about, at first I think I was getting about 5 pages of results, and I would go through the results, boop, 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 and look at all the things that people were making and posting on Etsy with the steampunk tag. Like I said, about 5 pages of that. And then I watched it explode. And now there are thousands, and you can't do that anymore. You can't sit and look at everything people have tagged as steampunk on Etsy anymore. It's all fittings anyway, but at the time there was a lot of like neat little art pieces and cool things. And you mentioned the old meme of goths discovering brown, and that always makes me laugh, because I remember in the 90s I was always like, oh, I love these goth fashions with the black leather and the silver buckles and everything, but what I really want is I want them in Indiana Jones colors. I want brown leather with brass fittings. And I was apparently really good in a past life because I got my wish in spades. So it kind of was for me at least, a case of looking at this beautiful fashion and going, man, I really like that, but I look better in these other colors. And then suddenly the universe provided. You'd think that if I got on the ball, I could have been a real leader in fashion, but I'm busy. So, yeah. But it was really interesting to watch the whole thing sort of become thing and hit the mainstream and get a lot of attention, and then suddenly there was a convention and we have to go to this convention, it's so cool, and yeah, it was fun. I mean, the aesthetic has, in my life at least, has always kind of been around as an undercurrent. I mean, if you go to Disneyland, it's all over the place, that whole, oh look, I mean, like the Dumbo ride, if you look really carefully at the Dumbo ride, it's built to look like a big toy, like a music box, or like a big toy, and they've had that going for longer than I've been around. You mentioned Captain Nemo and the Nautilus, and that aesthetic is there too. So watching it explode in, I don't know, what was it, around, I think it was around the mid 2000s that I really saw it start hitting the mainstream, and then there would be articles and people posting more stuff online, and that was just a lot of fun. Yeah. Oh God, quick, somebody say something.
So
I did actually want to jump in there. As a kid, I never got to go to Disneyland or Disney World, but I don't know if y'all remember the Viewmasters.
Yeah.
Master slides. I had the slides for Disneyland and Disney World and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And so you could I was like, oh my God, there's a ride of this? and begged my parents, and we were looking at going. And then my dad was like, okay, here's the thing. There's this new technology coming out called a video player, VHS or beta, and we could watch movies or we could go to Disneyland. And we ended up watching movies.
Well, the old 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride was kind of claustrophobic anyway. Now it's Finding Nemo.
Okay, good to know. You let me know that you made the right choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it served as a brief stint as the Atlantis ride.
Did it? I don't know. I think
so. Man, a big pool like that.
What do I know?
Leave it fallow.
They didn't. It was just
right.
It was the submarine ride until it turned into the Nemo ride. Now it's screens.
Don't they still have a Nautilus ride experience and some Vernian experience in Disney
At
Paris?
Disney Japan. Disney Japan has the Nemo sort of thing.
But
the Disney Paris is like straight up. It's tons of steampunk influence there.
I've never been, but I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
I've seen other people's pictures.
Me too, Kaja. I've not been, but I've looked from afar.
My main desire at this point to go to Paris is not the Louvre. I really just want to go live with Jules Verne at Disneyland in Paris. And people tell me that's a terrible choice, but whatever. No one will ask me about the subjunctive at Disneyland, and that is what I want. So yeah, beautiful. Tracy, what about you? Do you have any special memory, recollection from your early days that sort of lingers with you?
Well, I already mentioned the first meetup we did, where all I did was create a Facebook event, not expecting anything. I thought maybe 12 people would show up, and then we got overrun with 75. We've had, I guess one of my favorite events is our Christmas event for Steampunk Hawaii, which is a spaghetti Western lunch at Old Spaghetti Factory. And Old Spaghetti Factory has changed locations several times, but the decor is always so cool and so steampunk. You've got the dark wood, the stained glass windows, the sort of Victorian decor, and a trolley car in the middle of the restaurant. And so that's where we always go for our Christmas parties. And the first year we did that, again, a problem with underestimating my community. I reserved for 25 people and we ended up having about 70, and they hated us.
Oh
we had to move to a different room. I was like, oh no, they're kicking us out. They're kicking us out. Oh no, they're just moving us to the big dining room. It's been such a roller coaster, and getting back into the whole reading thing. I mean, one of the common threads throughout much of my group, I noticed, is that we all grew up reading sci-fi and fantasy. And it's a huge part of our nerddom. So when steampunk came along, that's sort of how we identified with it. But Yeah, other memories. Let's see. Well, one of our most fun ones, speaking of alternative subcultures to steampunk, was a silk punk meetup that I did at the Byodo Inn Temple. It's a replica of a Japanese Buddhist temple on the island of Oahu inside a graveyard. Speaking of goth. And it is itself an active Buddhist temple. So I had to call up the caretakers of this temple and try to explain what steampunk was to them. And they had no experience with cosplayers or any sort of group. And so I said, well, it's sort of, you know, we're a group that likes historical costuming and we like to mix our culture into it and that sort of thing. And then I ended up giving them a dissertation on silk punk, basically. And they said, well, I mean, you guys sound okay. Just be sure to be respectful. Take off your shoes if you go in the temple. Don't disturb anyone. You know, oh, and pay $100 fee to take photos. I was like, really? It's just a policy that they have for large groups. So I passed the hat. We got $100 easy. And it was one of the most beautiful photo shoots we've ever done. Just this gorgeous Japanese temple across a lake in the background. And everybody dressed up in Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Indonesian, Southeast Asian, steampunk, silk punk aesthetic. There's photos on our Instagram, Steampunk Hawaii, if you guys want to see.
Thank you, Tracy.
I've been to that temple, and it is a stunning place for pictures.
Gorgeous, right? Even if you're not dressed up, I recommend if you visit the island of Oahu to go over there and just wander around the temple, feed the ducks, take in the beauty of it.
The little birds that I've also been there, and they sold us food to give the fish, but the little birds will come and sit on your hand and steal the food, and so it's an absolute, like, you know, like Mother Nature moment, you know.
A Disney princess moment.
I think we were too busy cavorting around the grounds to feed the birds, but I definitely saw a lot of birds.
I was absolutely charmed. The little guys had no fear. They were just like, "Hi, what you got?"
Shout out to Drake and Sparky too, who have actually come down and visited and enjoyed one of our meetups in Hawaii. And if anyone from anywhere wants to come to Hawaii, just let me know, and I'll let you know when the meetups are. We have a couple planned in the future. July 20th, we're doing at Foster Botanical Gardens. They have an event called Midsummer Night's Gleam, which is like a family evening in the Botanical Garden. And a bunch of cosplayers are going to show up, and we're going to show up and kind of do a silk punk theme revision. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic.
So,
Yeah.
I know you'll post pictures so we can all live vicariously. So.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Erica, do you want to take a moment? I like to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to move on.
I've been thinking about it, and I feel like if I had to choose one moment, it would, you know, deny too much of my experience. The thing that I love so much is that each event is its own story, and every time I play an event where there's another music artist, there's an opportunity for me to collaborate with them and sit in on a song. And I've played with so many bands, and they're all the absolute best people. Like, the number of jerks that I've met in steampunk music is minuscule compared to other scenes, which are also okay. Like, musicians are generally good people and I like them, but I don't know. It's all been so good. I can't even pick a moment. But Tracy, you reminded me that my first steampunk experience was probably also at the old spaghetti factory in Sacramento in like 1983. So yeah, it was very aesthetically pleasing. Loved it.
I just want to I want to quickly state that one of my favorite memories is also one of my most inebriated, and Erica caught it on DVD.
Okay.
You were making a
Yes.
documentary, and Kevin took me to a absinthe party right before I was to go on camera and talk about academic things. And somebody made me an absinthe fizz, which is absinthe mixed with champagne. And I was lit
You are.
When so it's forever memorialized, that moment.
Well, and this, okay, so I'll just talk about this documentary real quick. This was a two-person documentary. It was myself and my boyfriend at the time, and we filmed me playing at SteamCon, I think in 2011. And Mike is in it, Kevin's in it. It's not widely released. It's on DVD, but nobody bought it. And I'm eventually, it needs subtitles, partly because of the drunkenness, but there is a lot of it is at the absinthe party. I intend when I have time, I'm gonna subtitle it and put it on YouTube at least. But it's a me-centric documentary from a long time ago. It's called Beautiful Fish, Unwoman Plays Cello for Steampunks. And it's old. I mean, it's interesting. It'll go eventually. I'll subtitle it. But yes, you were great, Mike. Everything you said was right on, but need subtitles.
I have such fond memories of the times I've seen you play live. They're just, oh, they're really wonderful.
Thank you so much. I'm always so happy to see you both as well.
Well, thank you.
So, my darlings, we could keep you forever and ever. You are all absolutely glorious and so funny and interesting. And I don't want to cut off the conversation. I also want to be respectful of your time. So, my dear airship ambassador, should we do a little round of our hope for the future of steampunk? And to be honest, everyone who's here in the audience today, we suspected we could easily go for a time. I'm realizing that time could be all day, but we would need absinthe cocktails at this point. Tea is insufficient. I recommend the cocktail they're describing is the best way to have absinthe, in my opinion. But what do you think, my darling? And then
Yes.
open it up for questions from everyone else after we do our little hope for the future.
I think that's great. I think it's great. So again, roundtable, jump in. But what are your thoughts, hopes, dreams for steampunk in the community now going forward? What would you like to see, either brand new or based on where we've been? Kaya?
Oh, I would love to see more conventions. I miss the conventions. It sounds like there are still some.
There are.
SteamCon was right in my backyard, and so that was always delightful for us. But I would really like to see more conventions.
True. So I have the running list, a calendar of all the steampunk events out on Airship Ambassador.
And such a fantastic resource.
Oh, thank you.
Terrible thing to say to someone, but
well, and there was a time when
almost every day.
Oh, every day. Good. Keep doing it. So there was a time when there were probably 40 big conventions around the world each year. And then it was dwindling. Conventions came and went. And then COVID kind of stopped everything for quite. So they are coming back. There's not anywhere near what it used to be, but there are some out there. And I agree. It'd be nice to see some more. It'd be nice to have another one back here in the Seattle area.
Such fun at those.
There is one actually this weekend, not too far, here in Port Townsend.
Oh, the
Cross-Screw Confederacy.
Yep.
Well, that's happening this weekend.
Oh.
You know, I even know the folks who run it. What's wrong with me?
I didn't Nathan and
see, okay, when I say I want more conventions, I acknowledge that some of this is my problem, not anybody else's. I've had
I'm with you. I miss that too, and especially because like if it's not happening on a large scale in the States, it's not happening at all in Canada. So
yeah.
Oh.
There was that wonderful Canadian steampunk event that happened at Niagara-on-the-Lake that I had the pleasure of attending a couple of times. It was a real gem. It was wonderful. And I know that the reason that had to take a hiatus was about personal and very private reasons. The convention was lovely and the venue was great. But still, it's sad when these wonderful gems go the way of the dodo. We, you know, the 19th century is full of extinctions. I'd like our steampunk conventions not to be part of that sort of vibe of the 19th century. So yeah, I'm with you all. I'd like more conventions. We do have some wonderful cons being mentioned in the comments. Well, Wild West Con is happening in March of 2025, and the theme is Steampunk Halloween for year 13.
Wow.
Con Possible is happening in February, I believe, and that's in the Atlanta area. There are a few one-day events being mentioned. Duel at Dusk may be back in the autumn. There's a Simi Valley event happening. If you have or know of a steampunk convention, if you would please post it in the comments. I know I'm missing SCADs. There's of course Testicon in the autumn. That's what November is happening.
November.
Key City that happens in Maryland. There's a newish one called Telltale Steampunk out of the Baltimore area that is inspired by my favorite things, books. And it's run by people who love books, and they theme it after an author or a type of book each year, which is really fun. And Stephen from Steampunk Explorer, you absolute mensch, is sharing his wonderful resource.
I literally was typing that comment just that moment.
Good. Thank you,
Thank
Erica.
you, Stephen.
Thank you. Yeah. So here is 3 cheers for our steampunk conventions. I think, you know, Tracy, tap in on this, but as an organizer for community, I find having events like this to organize around really help pull the community together too, and it becomes a real focal point for costuming and activities and make and takes and workshops and things you can do together as a group.
Absolutely, but dear God, it is so much work. Jason and Dina, all con organizers, hats off to you guys, because people have asked me multiple times to start a steampunk convention, and I say no every single time. I don't have enough time. I don't have the resources. I don't have a reliable team, and all those things are very important elements that go into a con, right, guys? But I found my family at Wild Wild West Con. James, oh my God, what's his name? James Breen had been bugging me for years and years and years to come down and see his con, and I finally did. I flew over, I landed at Old Tucson, and I walked into the theme park and just went, oh my God, this is amazing. And I met that year, I think I met Abney Park, Steamship Airship Isabella, a bunch of legendary crews. I met Professor Elemental there. So many people, and so many of you. In fact, all of you that I know I met at Wild Wild West Con.
That's where we met the first time. It was so lovely. I remember being like, you came all the way from Hawaii? The weather's awful here. What are you doing? But I was also very happy to meet you.
And the first year after I came, actually, no, I think the second year after I came, there were 2 people from Hawaii. And then the third year I came, there were 4 people from Hawaii. And so we had a small contingent actually that travels. I can't afford to travel to many cons. I know there's some people who are kind of con goers and they travel to everything that they can possibly get to. But I had to pick and choose very carefully, and so I chose Wild Wild West Con as my kind of traveling convention that I go to every year. And I've met people from all over the world there: New Zealand, Australia, Scotland, Ireland, England, just everywhere.
Japan, Italy.
Japan, amazing place to meet people. Yes, go to cons.
Yeah, great. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Phil and Kaja, because the conventions are really lovely, and I hope that we can, as a community, sustain them going forward. Because they need us to be there. I think all the con runners can second that. No people means no con. Yeah, they are very hardcore to put on.
Thinking about the future of steampunk, it's an observation. It's the future we're living in, which I'm really happy about. What I've noticed in the little bits and bites of steampunkness that I've experienced since COVID was, the lockdown side of it was winding down. I was doing a course on steampunk, and my students had this they were really more open to what might be steampunk. There was no, like, they didn't gatekeep my course. So when we did Treasure Planet, no one lost their minds. Whereas, like, I think back in the day, to when the sort of the second wave of steampunk was really happening, in the, like, 07, 08, 09, there were gatekeepers, and some of you remember that.
Yes.
And there was a thing called the Great Steampunk Debate, which should have been called the Not So Great Steampunk Debate. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. And what I'm loving about where we are now is that there's less of that gatekeeping going on. And like, I was just at an event at another sciencey event. We had like a science center down in Calgary, and they do, like, it's like STEM punk is sort of what, like, they were doing, but it's like they still spell it steam, but then they capitalize some of the letters so that you can see that it's still STEM. And there were people who were talking about physics, but everybody who was there was just really chill about, like, there was none of that, like, oh, well, it's not steampunk if it's not neo-Victorian, or if it's not Victorian. Like, back in the day, one of the major publishers flat out told their writers, if you don't set it in London, it's not steampunk.
Okay, that sounds fine. So it's not steampunk. Who cares?
Well, what I love now is that people are more like, there's more of a broad. Somebody said this in the comments earlier. The industrial era happened in different time periods for different countries, and so, like, once we get out of that Anglosphere and look beyond that, there's all these wonderful possibilities. I'm enjoying the heck out of that personally. So it's made for that, like looking at a comic like Monstrous, which is more Art Deco than other forms, but I still like to look at it as steampunk. Maybe it's just me going, like, I just wanted to write about it and say it was part of my scholarship, but I still think it is. So I'm enjoying the expansion of, I mean, we don't have to have these ridiculous arguments like we did back in the day.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I remember having an argument back with someone who's like, well, if it's not the right kind of screw head, can you call it steampunk? And I was like,
totally.
Who cares about screws?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
There is tea to drink.
Yes.
That's right.
No one
Everyone has tea.
Right? Here's to tea.
Well, and here's to one more thing that was really exciting, and then I'll shut up. Gail Carriger is, like, if you go to Goodreads, which is a decent metric for what people are actually reading, Gail Carriger, Sherry Priest, Malgene Brooke win steampunk. They're the top 10 in just about every steampunk list. And what I love about this was that one of the arguments I got into back in the day was with some, I guess, dudes who were like, dude, steampunk is real steampunk. It's taking this seriously. There's none of this frim flam over here. And I was like, are you kidding me? Have you been to a con? Like, we're tea dueling. It's fun. It's whimsical. James Blaylock, way back in the 80s, whimsical as heck. And what I love is now here we are 15, 16 years later, and all those serious steampunk books have been forgotten. Girl Genius is still going. People still love the whimsy. That was, I think, one of the core concepts. So I love that. And now I will hush.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you. You said everything I would want to say in spades. So good. Kevin, yeah. Should we open it up to some questions from our friends who are here? We promised that you would have time to ask questions. So, thank you all for your lively chat. It's so wonderful. And I know so many of you, and so seeing your names, it's just really delightful. But if you have a question, please do me a favor and follow the Gail Carriger method, which is to put a question mark at the front and the end of your question. It helps us see them more easily and more quickly in the comments. And for those who have never met me, you should know you cannot hide from me in the comments. I will find questions. If you do not volunteer questions, I will start asking them. I will come for your questions. So you might as well just throw them out there. There are no grades. No one is judging you. Have you heard us? We're all very affable people and we hate screws. So please ask questions. Yeah. I'll give you 30 seconds before I start asking them myself.
I guess everybody knows everything.
They're so well
In
informed.
my
All right,
experience.
here we go. Thank you, Sparky, for being first out of the gate. Ideas for new steampunk shenanigans. Do you all have any? Tracy, clearly you are hosting events. So
now there's a bunch of questions.
Ooh. I have to think about it. I have to think about the next fun thing that we're going to cross or mash up steampunk with.
Well, think about it. Everyone think about it. I'm going to dive into our next question. Unless you have an answer for steampunk shenanigans, we can always wrap around back to it.
I wouldn't know a shenanigan if I tripped over it.
I highly doubt that.
I don't have any fun anymore. All I do is work.
You need more tea.
I desperately need more tea. I can't get up from behind my desk at the moment.
So I want to do a shout out for Con Possible. And of course, Jason and Dina from Wild West Con, they know how much I adore them. But I wanted to call out Con Possible because they did something novel and fun this year that I think is opening up their convention and is a great thing to think about for future steampunk shenanigans. They're just like all the punks. We have no limiters. If you're like adding punk to something, you're welcome at our event. And it made it really lively and a really great jumping off point to spawn more activities and more whimsy. So I love that so much.
Yeah. Yes, I also want to know the difference between a convention and a festival. I'm sorry, I finally figured out that I hadn't been scrolling down on the comments, and now I'm seeing them all.
Aren't conventions and festivals the same thing, essentially? Festival just has a slightly more fun name.
Can we invite Stephen Beal to answer that question on camera if he wants to?
Stephen, would you like to be added to the chat?
You've done it now, haven't you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm grabbing you.
Yeah, I'm not going to put my camera on. You don't want to see my living space. So in the UK, and they have festival. Explaining the difference is a little bit tough, but usually when I think of a convention, I think of something at a hotel. It tends to be more expensive. They tend to be smaller. They're like a whole weekend. They run late. Whereas a festival in the UK, commonly what they have is they'll have a daytime event where it's mostly vendors and cosplayers and some programming in a historic town like Whitby or Haworth or someplace like that.
Well, it sounds like brass.
And then maybe at night they'll have a paid concert. And they have lots of those almost every weekend. And steampunk is huge in the UK, and the biggest steampunk event in the world is probably the Asylum Festival, which is, it's a little more like a convention, but it's still really a festival. It's not at a hotel. People will go and stay there. But it seems to me that it's just running a con seems to be a really big hassle. It's expensive. The hotels are expensive. They cost a lot of money to attend. They cost a lot of money to put on. Whereas you can do a festival for a lot less money. They're more accessible. And, my introduction to steampunk was going to Maker Faire in San Francisco and wandering into a steampunk section. And it seems to me that kind of lower cost model would maybe make it more accessible to people. And that's kind of a thought that I've had. And since the question of conventions came up, I thought I would raise that.
Thank you, Stephen. That's great. And thank you, Erica, for having us draw Stephen in.
Yeah.
Don't you
Go
think
ahead.
the buy-in from the city is really important? And then also there aren't as many like historically cool looking cities in the United States, especially on the West Coast. That feels like a bit of an issue to me.
Well, I guess it doesn't have to be a whole city. It can be museums. A lot in the UK. A lot of the steampunk events are put on by museums, like pumping stations, and even there's a big space museum in Leicester, where they have an event every November called Steampunks in Space, and it's like an outer space themed steampunk convention. So you see a lot of like steampunk Star Wars and steampunk Star Trek, and if you go on my website, Steampunk Explorer, I have photos from it. It looks like a blast. But they have those all the time in the UK, um, and it just strikes me how different it is because they do not have steampunk conventions there. There are some science fiction conventions, some fantasy conventions, but they do not have science fiction. They do not have steampunk conventions.
And yet, every time anybody's talked to me about Asylum, they just refer to, I mean, they just talk about it as a convention. So I think the terms get used sloppily in, at least when people are talking to me, because what you're describing does it sounds an awful lot like a Ren Fair, actually, but it sounds like what they're doing out in Port Townsend apparently this weekend, although yeah, we're kind of out of that. And don't they have one down in the ghost towns down in the American Southwest?
That's well.
Is that the Wild West one?
Yeah. There's a new one in Galveston.
Yeah.
I think it's called the Galveston Steampunk Exposition,
It
and
is.
that's at a railroad museum.
Oh,
Oh, and then we had
Um,
an event. It was just a one-day thing, but it was at the Museum of History and Industry in Seattle. That was a lot of fun.
That was great fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
but it is confusing because there are events that are called festivals that I think of as conventions, and there are events that I think of as festivals that call themselves conventions. So it is confusing, but that's kind of how I make the distinction is location and cost, and you kind of know it when you see it, which is sort of like what steampunk is.
I think somebody had commented, probably Jason Dean, about the expense of hotels. And so having a convention in a hotel is very expensive. So I could easily see events moving to other venues that might not typically host an all-out convention, but still have an event because it's less expensive and brings in more people in general for whatever that venue is. I could see that happening much more.
And I think one of the fun things about something of this nature is it can be more community driven as well, which means you can really get the buy-in of interest, but also maybe spread out some of the labor a bit. And in the heyday, I feel like there were more community groups that were doing adjacent things to festivals on a smaller scale, much like Tracy has described her events, more akin to that, and they were really lovely. So I do want to get into some more questions. Kevin, I think we need to have a roundtable about conventions and festivals and events and things we can do, because there's clearly a wealth of curiosity and also interest and passion. Jason and Dina asked if there are any elements we think are crucial to keeping a convention, speaking of, relevant. So I'm going to pass that on to the group and scroll back and look for some more questions. There's been a lot of chat, so pardon me while I look for your questions.
I think, well, as we were just talking about, I think cost is always an issue, especially post-pandemic, because like my household experienced job loss during the pandemic, and then, we're still working on recovering financially from that. And I also think, in doing things for younger folks, as we were talking about in the chat, like one of our favorite, I think for a lot of people, is seeing young adults come into steampunk conventions and understanding that their ideas about steampunk might be different than ours, and getting those people and getting the young folks involved and doing some of the organizing, I think would be really great, because like I have no idea what the youth are into these days, right? Um, I mean, unless it's Bluey, right? Because that's my kid's age right now. And if you have kids that are young, you know.
Bluey.
Oh my gosh, we have so much. I can definitely talk Bluey and how awesome it is. And there we go. Yeah, let's put it, the word properly is common in our house because they say that in Bluey, right? Whereas like Americans don't usually use the word properly as much.
We say it a lot at my house, but it came from a different cartoon.
Yeah, like these come from cartoons, right? And they say bum. It cracks me up.
Erica?
But young people. Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah. So there was an event in Sunol at a railway thing right before COVID, and they partnered with a school group, and it was like a STEAM, like STEM with arts in it. It was a STEAM educational group, and there were sponsors and stuff like that. And I played on an outdoor stage, and it was super fun. And then COVID happened, and they haven't done it again. But I think, and I was thinking about this when talking about festivals too. If you can partner with an educational association or institution of some kind, and then like really bring it into like teens or community college or whatever, I think that'll be good. Also, I think TikTok, although I don't like it, the youth seem to.
Good old TikTok. I'm on there doing my weird middle-aged lady thing. And being cringe.
Well, it's more clock punk, I guess.
Tiki talkies.
At this point, we take all the punks, right? Whatever punks we can get, in that bubble. It's good. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how to get young people interested. That is one of the questions Erica touched on. I think it's a really great question. And it is right being where the young people are, I think. But I'd love to hear from some of you, especially those of you who have young people. Mike.
It's not that I have young people, it's that I teach young people. My young people aren't they're interested in steampunk, but like young people already are. Like when I was teaching my steampunk course, right away my students were like, "Did you watch Arcane? On Netflix?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." And then I went and I watched it. And again, this is one of those things that like back in 2008, there'd have been gatekeepers going, "That's no steampunk." And I'm watching it going, this is totally steampunk. And it's this evolution of what's going on. And so they're already into it. They're reading the comics, they're playing games, video games. I think that's one of the areas that like, especially in steampunk research, that sort of got missed, like how important Final Fantasy,
it's
where you literally you literally fought a steam train in that one game. And people are like, it's all Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. And I'm like, it's not at all, but it's a bunch of other things. And they're already into it. And it's finding those nodes that they're into that maybe we aren't. I think that's a big part of that. Like when you think of who you're going to bring as a guest, don't think what you liked if your goal is to bring young people, because I mean that takes me back to like being in the room with James Blaylock at one of the Steam cons, and it was this cavernous hall and there were 8 people, right? Versus stuff that people, it's just knowing where their touchstones are. And that Steam, and the other place that we need to be looking is anime and manga, because the Japanese have been doing steampunk since before it had a name, and they're fascinated by it. There's a term, I can't say it in Japanese, but it means the Paris of our dreams, and it's a whole culture thing in Japan, wherein they dig a quasi-European vibe, hence just about every Miyazaki movie ever made. But it doesn't have a precise location necessarily, but they just sort of like that whole scene. And tons and tons and tons of manga and anime that have that. So I think doing stuff like getting American voice actors who do stuff for anime dubs would be a good route, because you go to an anime-thon, those are the guests.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great observation. And I do think that there is just this rich, wonderful world that doesn't get explored very much at our conventions and events. And that's a real loss to all of us. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And also, whoever mentioned Violet Evergarden in the comments, 100%. But also have a box of tissues nearby and an emotional support cup of tea for every episode.
I cried so much.
Needed therapy after. It's
Pretty much. It was therapy.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. So before we wrap up, are there any last burning questions for our wonderful guests? And also, to those of you who are wondering, how do we keep steampunk going and vibrant? May I say a little plug for our wonderful guests. Support your creative people. Do not buy AI art. Buy art by human artists. I said it. I must stand by it. When you meet a new person in steampunk, say hello, welcome them. Tell them something fun to do. Join the Tea Scouts. That's basically their whole mission, is to find new people and be like, ooh, do you want to do something fun? We're weird. Let's go do it together. We won't even talk about whether it's a flathead or a Phillips or whatever. We don't care. No one cares. So support your community. Tell your con runners and your event organizers thank you. Because it's important to let them know when something doesn't go well, when there's a problem. But I have to assure you that the thing they hear the least is thank you. And they could use a little bit of boost because, as we discussed, it's expensive and hard. There's not really profit in it. There's just passion. So they could use a bit of thanks. And get out there and leave weird reviews for books. They can be like one sentence. I really liked it. It paired well with my cup of tea. You should read it. No one's grammar checking your reviews. I promise. Promise. They are not, except for weird people. We don't like them. They're not weird in the way we like. They're weird in that awful way that we don't talk about, and they're not invited to tea. So, Kevin, do you have any last comments to send us out with?
Oh, just want to say thank you to everybody for joining and for watching and all your comments, and appreciate everybody's input, and definitely look forward to doing this again.
Yes, we will. I think we have to. We talked about maybe doing a quarterly round table. And I'm like, well, Kevin, I guess we have to, because this was too
I guess
fun.
we have to. I already have so many more ideas that I have been writing down, so yeah.
Yes, so good. To our esteemed guests and luminaries who joined us this morning, when I call you a luminary, it is because you illuminate our community and elevate all of us. I'm so grateful for your time this morning. If any of you would like to share a last comment before we wrap up, or the Lisa, I don't know what time is. Time is hard. I live in the desert. I've made bad choices.
Time zone conversions break my brain. I always have to use a website to do it because otherwise I will mess that shit up so hard. It's like you think you have it. Unless if it's more than an hour, nope, you got to use a website. It's true.
So, funny story, I thought I was actually 2 hours ahead of you guys. Turns out I'm 2 hours behind. So I was thinking 12 p.m. Instead, I ended up getting up at 7 a.m.
Yes. Yes.
That's all right.
Yes.
I still love you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
When we were like, would you like to start a little later? And you're like, no, earlier is better. I was like, it's so early for you.
That was my bad,
you.
but it's been absolutely lovely. I have so many new ideas and resources and things rattling around in my brain thanks to you all this morning. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Absolutely.
Really wonderful to kind of get back into, see what everyone's doing.
Okay, thank you.
And we've been out of touch for some time.
You're just busy working,
just busy
making art,
yeah,
throwing Kickstarters.
And both of you
circles
are busy with conventions.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I know at least two of you are busy teaching young people and grading and dealing with academia, which is its own nightmare hellscape. And I'm so proud of you both for doing that. You almost make me want to go back to academia, and then I remember. So, Erica, thank you for being here and gracing us with your presence. It's been so lovely.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm really happy to see all of you, and the questions are good. And yeah, it's cheering me up a little bit. Things are a little tough in my life right now, so this has been a breath of fresh air and joy. And I want to say, anyone who ever wants to ask me a question, I'm available on a bunch of different social media, email, whatever. I am happy to hear from people. I don't have a handler, so just ask me whatever you want. And if it's offensive, I'll tell you to F off. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh my gosh. Well, my darlings, I'm going to stop the recording now. For all of you who've joined us in the audience, thank you for being here. Your presence and support inspire us to do another one. Please watch all of our normal social media spaces, but also especially my newsletter. Everyone, newsletters are the wave of the future by going back to the past, because the algorithm on social media hates your creative people and wants them to suffer. So please join our newsletters so that we can tell you things and you can find out about them. Newsletters, the wave of the future. But I do post about these things in my newsletter. It's free. It's not on Substack. I'm just a weirdo sending out 2,000 words a month to tell you about steampunk stuff. Stephen Beale has the Steampunk Explorer. If you do not subscribe to that, do that thing. Go out. It's wonderful and it's free. You should follow it. He's got great news. He's a wonderful champion of our community. And just subscribe, like, follow. We will get something out probably in the autumn. Maybe not in the summer. This is summer, kind of. I don't know. Kevin and I will talk about it.
We'll work on it.
We'll bring back another roundtable. We're interested in the topics you would like to hear about. So if there's something you're particularly interested in, please let us know. Any of us. And also, by the by, no one gave us authority to do this. We took it. So if you would like to make your own and post your own and host your own roundtable, no one can stop you. Zoom is not that expensive. Go forth, do good works, be queer, do crimes. Happy Pride. Thank you for joining us for this wonderful steampunk roundtable. Now go forth, have tea. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Kevin.
Thank you.